Sean Sticks Larkin here. Howard, as a policeman, I always knew where the high crime areas were located. Now there's a way for you to know as well right on your iPhone. It's called Crime in Place. Using current FBI data, Crime in Place steers you away from the places you don't want to be, and it works anywhere in the country. So before you go down the street or out of state, go to crimeinplace.com and get your free download of Crime in Place. Stay aware, stay safe with Crime in Place.
That's a good app to have, especially during this
time of the year.
Season,
absolutely. Man. A lot of people on the road.
Know which exit to pull off on and which one not to pull on. I would recommend pulling off at any exit that has a Quick Trip.
I totally agree. That's one thing. I mean, we'll give Quick Trip. They're a Tulsa-based company, a shameless plug here.
Yeah.
Anywhere they are in the country, they are clean, they are friendly, set up exactly the same, and so forth. As Howard, for those of you watching this on YouTube, Howard's sucking on a Quick Trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drink.
Hey, Sean.
Yes, Howard.
How you doing?
Good, buddy. Been a good day.
Hey, it has been a good day. We had some crab. That was pretty good.
Not crabs. We ate crab.
We ate crab. Stone crab. It's stone crab season. Okay, so imagine that you are a police officer in Kansas, but you're a state trooper.
Why would I do that?
I don't know. Well, I mean, Kansas is a big place. There's a lot of state to troop on.
There is. I agree. I have driven through it. I've actually been pulled over by a Kansas State trooper driving to the Big 12 championship game in Kansas City. Not to go off, topic here.
Yeah.
Got pulled over by the same trooper on the way to the game, and the next day on the way back by the same trooper.
I think he had a crush on you.
He was not happy.
Were you speeding?
I was the passenger. My buddy was Luke Sherman. He was the driver.
Okay.
And we were speeding both ways and got pulled over by the same trooper.
Well, that's funny. So imagine you're a police officer in Kansas and you're pulling over Luke Sherman.
Okay.
But you get tired of that, so you go into a kind of an interesting world. You go into cybersecurity.
Oh yeah. Big thing nowadays.
Right, absolutely. And through your cybersecurity, you come up with some kind of interesting things. You even patent something called social DNA.
Wow.
Which you're able to track. Well, this is pretty cool. You're able to track and solve crimes through somebody's social profile.
Big time.
That's what I guessed. That's one of the many things that he does today. But we got Morgan Wright with us today. How you doing, sir?
Gentlemen, it is a high honor. And hey, sorry you got pulled over, man. But hopefully, if he did, he contributed to the general fund of Kansas so that we could have better roads in that state. I appreciate it.
I promise you, your roads are still better than ours.
Yeah. I don't have any hills.
No, yeah. Who has great actually highways on the side? Texas.
They did.
Like as soon as you cross out of Oklahoma to Texas, it's instantly better. But
and a nice rest stop.
Yes.
Yeah, that there as well. Hey, but you know what else we like to do on this fun podcast called Coptales&Cocktails? We like to have a drink.
Got to have a drink.
So, Mr. Wright, can you tell us what we're drinking tonight?
Well, I don't know what you guys are drinking, but I am drinking. I'm a huge Belgian beer fan. So I just got this in yesterday. It took 2 months to get here. It's called Chimay Grand Reserve. It's quadruple barrel fermented. It is 10.5%. This was bottled in 2018.
Oh, so that's 20 proof. That's a heavy beer. You ain't drinking 2 or 3 of those.
Well, I'm not driving either, and no chance of me getting pulled over unless I'm going from my upstairs to my downstairs. So I think I'll be good.
Now, did it take, how long did you say it took to get to you?
2 months. This stuff was back ordered. I've ordered stuff from Belgium directly, and this one comes from a website called Belgian Style Ales. They bring in stuff from Belgium, and then you can order it. It comes out of Ohio. But this stuff was back ordered. It took me 2 months to get it.
Gotcha. So it wasn't held up in the ports there in L.A. or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I think, it has been before. I mean, I've had some orders come in. It's taken 45 days to get from Belgium here because it just all gets, screwed up in the ports trying to get through.
Well, we think we're funny.
St. Bernardus.
Yeah, we're drinking a Belgian Wit because we think we're funny. See how we
Wit?
Wit. It's not.
And actually, Sean, I have the St. Bernardus glasses and a bunch of the beer downstairs. So that's some good stuff.
All right, good. So, Mr. Wright, it's good to have you. Thanks,
sir.
For coming.
Hey, I appreciate you guys really appreciate you guys doing this. Obviously, I've watched Live PD and followed you guys. So it's a high honor to follow even people like Kim Rossma. I know Kim, I've actually talked to him before. I've actually talked with him about some geographical profiling stuff. So you guys have had some great episodes.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been very, very fortunate. We are definitely grateful for people like yourself and everybody else that's kind of come before you, and some of the ones we've got lined up down the road. Very fortunate.
Right. Well, that's why we have you on today, sir. Let's get into it. Tell us how you became a police officer there in Kansas and ended up being in the nation's capital, Kansas to Washington. This is like a law enforcement Cinderella story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. My dad was military, so I was born in Kansas, Fort Riley. We moved around the world. I grew up in a foreign country called Iran back in the day before it became totally hostile to the United States back in the days of the Shah. And so, I was actually, had it not been for a 6-year-old kid, I probably would have been in the military flying helicopters instead of being a cop. I'm getting ready to go to my flight school in Fort Rucker, Alabama. My packet's in, and some little 6-year-old kid, I'm out roller skating, staying out of trouble. The 6-year-old kid trips, falls, hits me in the side of the knee, and I'm in a cast from my toe to my crotch. The summer before I'm supposed to go to advanced camp and then get my packet and go. And so I ended up failing the physical. So just decided, hey, I was actually a music major in college, believe it or not, went to school on a instrumental music scholarship. So I thought, okay, there's still that to fall back on. And then I thought, it's easier to arrest the little bastards than it is to teach them. So I said, hey, I want to become a cop. So started off in Salina, Kansas. All the brass instruments. So you name, I used to play at one time like 12 different instruments. So, but euphonium, what was called baritone, was my major instrument. But I played bass trombone in the jazz orchestra, played banjo and guitar in our fraternity band. So just always loved doing that kind of stuff.
Let me ask you, you talk about Salina, Kansas. The chief of police there, was there a chief of police Hill? Does that name ring a bell?
Mike Hill. Yeah, he came after the chief that I had, John Woody. John Woody was an old Marine that had a dog. Trying to think of her name. He would let her go up and down the hall. She was an old bulldog. She would piss on stuff and leave piles in the hallway, and nobody would. I mean, he was the chief. So yeah, no, Mike Hill actually came after, and one of my training officers ended up being his assistant chief, a guy named Mike Marshall. So yeah, I knew Hill.
So actually,
I mean, not personally, but I knew of him. Yeah.
So, well, Mike Hill, his son is a guy named Brian Hill who works here on Tulsa PD with us, and they had come from Nebraska, is where he had come from to be chief there in Salina.
What is this, 7 separations?
I'm telling you, it's so crazy.
You guys know everybody.
No, Brian Hill's a good buddy of mine, man. He wrestled at the University of Oklahoma, but I knew his dad was chief of police there at one time. So, man, what a small world.
Do you have the cauliflower?
My employee number was 261. I started in Salina, Kansas in March of 1982.
Jeez.
You've been on the job.
I'm an old fart.
Did it a minute ago.
So, Morgan, how'd you end up? Tell us how you progressed out of Kansas, other than the fact that you wanted to see some terrain.
So I was on Salina PD, got on the state highway patrol, then became a state trooper. And it would have made sense to keep me in Salina, but I was in Salina. There was a kid in Garden City and another kid in Olathe. So they took me in Salina, moved me to Garden City, took the guy in Garden City, moved him to Olathe, and the guy in Olathe moved him to Salina. So I, ended up being in Southwest Kansas, and I loved being a state trooper, but I always wanted to be an investigator. Well, Kansas is a highway patrol, not a state bureau of investigation, not a state police. So I joined the police department and started working the streets again, then worked my way up into investigations. But I started focusing on a lot of things. Like I went through the original VICAP training that the FBI put out. So that's the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. So I went through the original training on that. When I was a trooper, we stood up our first criminal interdiction unit. So dealing with people, understanding behavior and psychology. So that got me interested in interview and interrogation, serial crime profiling. So I got, fortunately, a guy named William Peters was one of the instructors, one of the original members of the FBI's behavioral science unit. So got some excellent training from him. But you kind of get to a point though, Howard, when it's kind of like, imagine that you're the world's best Shakespearean actor, but you're playing to an empty house every night. I would rather take my chance. I just wanted to say, hey, how can I just stretch my wings? How can I get out and do something? And just through a series of circumstances, it ended up involving technology, because I ended up teaching computer crime and actually spent a year training the FBI on how to conduct computer crime investigations over the internet. But it was all the blend of people and technology. So got an offer from a defense contractor to move out to Virginia, starting in August of 99, and then moved out, commuted back and forth, and then moved out full time in January of 2000. And I've been out here for 21 years now.
And they, well, I was hoping that you were going to say something like probably the most boring job in the entire world is being a Kansas Highway Patrol officer, since that I think it was only 6 hours, but it felt like 3 weeks driving across Kansas for people who don't know this.
454 miles from the western border to the eastern border. Yes. No. Well, no. Let me tell you, I was always in the top 5 of the state for felony arrests because you go out and you make your own work. That's the great thing about being a trooper. I was nosy. I was inquisitive. Got myself involved in just lots and lots of. If you do enough car stops, you'll run into enough people that are wanted for stuff. Truck drivers, everything wanted for murder. To one night, I see, and it's one of those things too, Sean, you know this too. After you work the streets long enough, you see a car come by, there's something wrong with it, like with the plate or something else. And this is 11 o'clock at night, and there is a Camaro coming past me, and it goes by me, but I see a paper plate over a permanent plate. And I turn around on that thing and light it up, pull it over, because it's like, what's a temporary tag doing over a permanent tag? Right. And the temporary tag was expired. Well, as I walk up on it, I walk up on the passenger side because I'm the only guy out. I'm the only guy out for like 3 counties. I have no backup. So I'm walking up on the passenger side, and long story short is this guy takes off running because I see a sawed-off 40. He had his hand on it in between the seats. There's a lady in there. I grab her because, bird in the hand. So he ends up running off. The troops come out. We work this till the next morning, put a helicopter in the air. One of the sheriff's officers, the full farm boy, flies helicopters to fly irrigation circles and pivot irrigation to make sure it works. So we've got that up there. Well, the state patrol gets their plane up there. And all of a sudden we see the signal is that they found the suspect because it's called special high intensity tracking system. So when the shit hits the fan, which is the prop, all they do is when they spot the guy, they throw a roll of toilet paper out, it swizzles, sticks down to the ground, because we really had no good radio communications back then. So this guy had just gotten out of a Texas prison for robbery. He had robbed a bunch of convenience stores on the way up, and he was going to shoot somebody, is what we think. And so I was there when they picked him up. 2 big boys from Texas said, "You're going to be picking cotton in a long time in Huntsville, boy." That's the last time I saw Gary. What's his name? Gary Clark, I think it was.
Man,
not the musician, right? Yeah, Gary Clark Jr.
He's really good. He played.
No. But we had pipeline. We had drugs all the time. We had major, seizures going on. So there was a lot of activity out in that area.
Yeah, I still can't get past the fact that you called your helicopter surveillance shit, and to signal that you found somebody, you threw toilet paper out. That's rich.
It is. That's good.
That's some funny stuff.
Innovative.
You got there.
Innovative.
Yeah, he's like Vic, man. He got stories. All right, so you end up in working for a defense contractor.
Yeah, the defense intelligence community stuff. So I found out when you're the guy that understood how to turn on a computer, and that was your only skill at the time, and they start making you in charge of all the technology and stuff. But we were working on a lot of stuff. Back in that time it was called information security. Before it was called cybersecurity. But we were doing stuff with big defense systems, big financial systems, about how to defend and protect those. And then right before 9/11, I actually switched to another company, another defense contractor, and I was doing work on Plan Colombia down in Bogota. And believe it or not, I know you guys will talk to Murph later, my co-host, on our podcast, Game of Crimes, but Murph and JP are the ones that brought down Pablo Escobar. Well, I didn't realize that in 2000 when I was in Bogota, JP and Javier Pena and I were crossing paths in the embassy down there while I was doing this work for the government. So, but it was really neat stuff as far as I'm concerned, because I've always been one of these guys. I said, look, how can you deliberately apply technology to solve big problems at scale? As one detective, I could solve one case, but what if you could create some systems, some big things that could help other cops solve hundreds of cases, at one time, or address and find risks. So 9/11 hit, then it was all about terrorism, identifying risk. How do you sift through tons of data looking for that needle in the haystack? And I used to approach it by saying, screw trying to find a needle in a haystack. You just waste a lot of time making the haystack smaller. Use a bigger magnet. So we just came up with ways to use a bigger magnet. And One of the ways was actually classified, became unclassified, but I ended up briefing the FBI on the DC sniper case on how to use all of this information that was out there to determine how many people had contact with law enforcement, what's the probability that somebody would have 4 to 5 contacts with law enforcement. And then long story short, everybody in the DC region was looking for a white panel van. Wasn't a white panel van. 97 vehicles had their plates run, Sean, 2 or more times. Out of those 97, 3 were Chevy Caprices, 1 belonged to Malvo and Muhammad, and 4 times from scenes of homicide, a dark colored or burgundy colored Caprice was seen leaving the scene of a shooting. So we had all the information. By the way, their tag, did you know their tag was run? They were contacted, or their tag was run 13 times in 33 days by law enforcement, and nobody ever picked up on the fact that these guys were
in the area. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, kind of briefly.
Well, because there was no way to know. I was going to say, I'm sorry, there's no way to know from the history of running the tag back then. I could run Sean's tag. He got stopped, on one day. He could get stopped on the next day. And I would really not know that he had been stopped the day before looking into the central system. So we lack this visibility to say, what's the real history of this car? What's the real history of this person?
And this car was actually their shooting platform, right?
Yeah, actually, one of our episodes we did was with Jeff Nice. Jeff was on the Montgomery County SWAT team. He was there when they took down the snipers. It was a hide. What they had done is cut a hole in the rear of the trunk. It was something they learned from the IRA. The IRA used to do this and put a hide in the trunk of the car. And so they would pull the rag out. They could get that Bushmaster through there. The scope would be big enough that they could actually see their target, shoot through inside of the trunk, and then put the rag back in the hide, the hidey hole, and drive off.
Well, yeah, it's amazing nowadays. I mean, with all the technology that we have, all the cameras that we have, all the data that we have, all the, as you're talking about, I want to hear more about the social DNA here a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, that stuff's pretty recent. We didn't have that 15 years ago when that was going on.
Well, even access to LPRs, which is license plate readers. I mean, there's some departments that have them, on cars that drive around and just read plates all day, checking for stolen cars, wanted vehicles, things like that. But now, I know we had some ATF guys assigned to us, and so we would get a tag, reference a shooting case, and they could run it through an LPR system that other non-law enforcement related companies use to do things like Google and stuff like that when they drive around and do mapping, and it picks up all this stuff.
No shit.
Oh yeah. And so we would be able to go, through this system, we can go, hey, this car has been seen at this address, or it's in this area. It's popped up here, here, and here a couple different times. And so then we could start working a neighborhood to look for suspects' cars tied to some of our shootings.
Damn.
But that's stuff that literally just in my in my unit, in the gang unit, gun unit, 5 years ago, we weren't doing. I mean, it just, and that's not.
Yeah, Vigilant is a company. They've got more info than law enforcement does. These private companies have more because it's for insurance, it's for collections, it's for people get behind on their payments, so they're repossessing vehicles. So the private sector out there has a ton of information that law enforcement is just trying to figure out how to tap into.
Yep.
So, like insurance companies, actuaries, those are the ones that assess risk and say, okay, yeah, you're probably going to be a safe driver. We'll give you a lower rate, or hell no, we ain't insuring you, right? So actuaries do that. Is there something in law enforcement that kind of works along the same lines? Do you use the same risk prediction to see where crime's going to happen, crime may happen, where we might be able to find the people that we're looking for? Is that kind of what you're saying with some of this Vivient technology? Was it Vivient?
Or Vigilant. Vigilant's more about just recording license plates that are out there, and so that you can go back, like Sean said, and just do an inquiry on a tag. But what you're getting into, for a long time, they've talked about predictive policing. You had Kim Rossmo on. Like I said, one of the things they looked at too was taking kind of the same thing with geographic profiling, but you could take a look at activity that was going on and predict this will be the next hot spot. This is where we should then have resources. I mean, you can't put a cop on every street corner. You just can't do that. So you have to get smarter to say, what's going on? Where do we predict that we will see? And by the way, you can predict things based upon, is there a professional game coming into town? Is there a concert coming into town? I mean, there are things that follow certain events, but yeah, a lot of this was, it's kind of like the Minority Report and Tom Cruise. It's the pre-crime bureau. You're trying to say, hey, can we figure out what's going to go on before it actually goes on? Now, but in the same way as actuaries you're talking about, Howard, actuaries can tell you how many people are going to die each year, what age they are, what income they have, et cetera. They just can't tell you who.
Right.
Predictive policing is the same thing. I can't tell you who, but I can tell you we have a pretty good idea that there's going to be an increase in this kind of crime or this kind of crime in these areas. So we'll staff accordingly for these areas. And then it's up to the officers to, use their skills, their common sense, good judgment, and, try and preempt a lot of this stuff. But if you're at least in the area, you got a better chance of stopping it than if you're just driving around, 10, 15, 20 city blocks trying to be lucky and have that one thing pop up in front of you.
Well, okay, let's talk about this. Concerts, sporting events, crime like that. You expect a surge of people. Is it just since there's more people, the likelihood of crime is higher, or since there is an event going on, the criminals go to the event?
So take the Super Bowl, for example. One of the biggest things they track with the Super Bowl is human sex trafficking, sex workers coming in. And with that comes associated things around drugs, prostitution, could be organized crime as well, too. You could have gambling and stuff. So, based upon certain events that certain types of activities follow those events. A concert, same thing with the concert. What do you find at a concert? I don't want to sound like I'm profiling with a small p, not a big one, but you're going to get an increase in drug trafficking, or alcohol sales to minors, or some things like that. A lot of it, though, is you got to base it in context. You will not see the same kind of activity happening in Salt Lake that you will in downtown Dallas, when a concert comes into town, simply because there's
Salt
just
Lake,
not
rough.
the availability of those. Yeah.
Been to Salt Lake. It's rough.
Yeah, I love Salt Lake, man.
Yeah, it is. My daughter lives in Ogden, so I go to Salt Lake frequently. Yeah. It's a tough crowd.
No booze, man, in some of those areas. It's rough. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Have you been into a liquor store in Utah? Obviously,
No.
Right.
Have you been to a strip club in Salt Lake City?
No, I haven't.
Oh, we went there.
Senator, I can neither confirm nor deny. Yeah.
Hey,
no.
well, I will say this. First of all, I'm not a big strip club guy, but I did go on a ski trip several years ago with a bunch of guys, and they wanted to go. And obviously, it is a very religious state.
It is.
It is. And
Yep.
So we went into a strip club. First of all, at least back then, the bars to get in there, you had to have I think it was a membership.
Yeah, it's like $5.
Yeah. So, or you could get someone inside to sponsor you. So people would sit at
Please,
tables.
I would like to come in the strip club. Sponsor me.
They sit near the door so that they can see you and realize you can't get in, and they go, hey, if you buy our table a pitcher of beer, we'll sponsor you guys. So all these guys are getting free beer all night long by just sponsoring people. So anyways, we end up at a couple bars. Then we end up at a strip club, and you go in, and you know how when a woman is working in there,
Never been to one.
and they've got their bottoms on, you take your dollar bill or your $5 or whatever it is, and you put it in their the hip strap, whatever we want to call it.
Yes, sir.
There they have or had at least, I have no idea what it is now, but I want to say it was like 3 or 4 feet behind the metal bar that went around the stage that they had to stay behind, and they had a bouncer that stands there at the stage. You can't touch the girl, so you can't give them the money. So you literally have to fucking wad your dollar bill up like a baseball and throw it at them so that it could get to them, because you couldn't give it to them. So anyways, we stayed around, drank one pitcher of beer, and got the hell out of there. So
Well, liquor stores are worse. You guys are familiar with Handmaid's Tale, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like the grocery store in
Oh,
Handmaid's
yeah.
Tale, when they walk in, they're like, oh my goodness, today they have bananas. Like, that's what their liquor stores are up. Like, oh my goodness, today they have vodka. I mean, they put one bottle out. There's a guy behind these shelves, right? They put one bottle of vodka out. Somebody takes that vodka, and then they put another bottle of vodka out right behind it. It's sad. I feel sorry for those
Great
people.
Some guys, when I was
Great.
doing stuff for the State Department Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, we were over in countries like Pakistan, which there are no strip clubs in Pakistan, but in Turkey and the UAE, they tried to get you to go out to these places. And I'm like, guys, sorry, you go out and do it. But here's one thing I know. We're on their territory. We're not on mine. If something happens, it doesn't matter how small it is, your life's going to get ruined. Your career's going to get ruined. So you guys go have fun.
But
And I'm going to stay here. Now, we're not, if you're in the United States, different ballgame, but when you're overseas, it's what happens all the time. They target you. If you go to UAE, these high-end, it's like called the Zinc Club on top of the Hilton, the Hyatt in downtown Dubai. And Russian hookers is what they were. These were high-end, brought in, and that's what they did is they targeted Americans, Brits, and other stuff like that. And
said that was
it's just so I've always had this kind of aversion. It's kind of like the States, you feel good there, but it's like you go overseas, it's like not a chance, pal.
Yeah, not at all. Okay, so let's talking
Sir.
about how we're using technology to kind of help prevent crime, predict crime, and hopefully solve some crime as well.
Yeah. So here's one of the things I came up with actually. So some of this work originally started as classified when we're working on the 9/11 stuff, post 9/11. So 6 of the 19 hijackers had contact with law enforcement. One of them, for example, give you an example from your area, Nawaf Al-Hazmi was stopped by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol on April 1st, 2001, written a traffic ticket. In August of 2001, he was put on a watch list by the State Department. So why do you put somebody on a fucking watch list that is already in the country? Because the left hand isn't talking to the right hand. Nawaf Al-Hazmi, between him and Mohammed Atta, were the two key players in the whole hijacking scheme. So we looked at that. We started saying, what are the relationships between people? That led to this stuff, then briefing the Bureau and starting to say, this is how you look at. So you draw circles around the cities and the areas where things were happening. And this actually came from serial crime profiling, looking at how serial killers worked and serial rapists. So a lot of times they would have low-level contacts with law enforcement, but you can never piece them together. Cops are good at math. If you give me 2 and 2, I can tell you it's 4. But if I say the answer is 4, but trying to come up with, then what are the 2 parts that equate to 4? It's a whole different ballgame. How do you come up with that? So we were trying to say, let's at least give you one piece of the puzzle so you can solve it. And that was, if you drew circles around Prince William, Prince George's, Montgomery County, and looked at all the vehicles just in those 3 counties, and every agency has their own unique identifier. It's called an ORI, but it's like an IP address. Everybody's got a unique one. So I know if Sean runs a plate in Oklahoma, I can tell you down to the terminal basically who ran it or who in Los Angeles did it. And that gives me a place to go. So we looked at this and we said, and that's where we started saying, how many people have contacts? So 40 million had at least one contact, and then you get down to 5 or more contacts, that number became very small. Then you apply that to the people in those areas. And again, it came down to there were only 4 vehicles. And by the way, there was the sniper vehicle, Muhammad's vehicle, was the only vehicle in the United States who had its license plate run in the National Capital Region and in Montgomery, Alabama, where the other shootings happened, that they tied them together through ballistics. So we had the answers there already. So fast forward, I was doing work at the Department of Justice on information sharing. It's called One DOJ now, but we said, how do you share information between 18,000 federal, tribal, state, and local law enforcement agencies? And they were approaching it all wrong. I mean, quite frankly, they kept looking at it wrong. And I said, it takes too long to go into everything, but let's just put it this way. The people in the room that I was working with, not the agents who were on the street, but the executives that were supposed to be making decisions, not a one of them had put a pair of handcuffs on people in the last 15 or 20 years. And half of them had never had a real law enforcement job. They were just bureaucrats. So I'm like, I slapped my hand one day and said, look, my homicide trumps all of your turf battles. I don't give a shit. So our first victory, and Sean, you'll appreciate this one. Our first victory in combining all this information together, because if you want to connect the dots, you got to collect the dots and you got to put the dots all in one place. The sniper case taught us one thing is you can't have multiple systems for me to go through and check my ballistics. Why should I have to go to the FBI, then the DEA, and then ATF? I want one system to rule them all. So Ashcroft was the attorney general at that time, based upon, and it was, don't want to sound like I'm sitting here patting my back, but it was actually I was responsible for this work. I wrote the concept of operations. They actually wrote a memo that says there shall be one repository for all ballistic information going forward. And it's called NIBIN now, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. And that was one of our small victories. So that's where I started getting this idea is that, hey, look, the problem with solving crime is we think about solving it wrong. The problem isn't the problem. The problem is the way we think about the problem. And what you do is you say, police departments get a case and they put it on their social media and they say, hey, come to our site, take a look at it. And if you know anything, give us a call. Well, what if the information needed to solve a case in Tulsa is resting in Florida? How the hell do you connect those people? Because they're not connecting to a case. They have nothing in common with that thing on your website or on your Facebook page. So did some work at DHS on the consolidation of the terrorist watch list. I led the subject matter piece of that. And we started looking at it again. We were looking at it all wrong. Nawaf Al-Hazmi was the prime example. Why aren't we comparing things that we already know against things you're looking to prevent, like the State Department watch list, and say, before you put them on a watch list, is the son of a bitch already in the country? No need to put them on a watch list. Put a pointer in the system and tell me if when you flag his ass, we want to pick him up. So, fast forwarding through history, the first what I first came up with was actually back in 2012, and it was using Facebook to begin with. And I said, a case is like a social profile, which means that when you and I guarantee you, if the minute you send an email to somebody, how many of you guys have sent an email to somebody you've only met for the first time, and all of a sudden they show up in your social media feed or Facebook feed to say, you may want to connect to this person.
Yep.
Now, you know why? Because there's 5 things that connect us: date, location, time, demographics, relation. If you have a homicide, Sean, what does that case have in it? It happened at a place, it happened at a date, it happened at a time, it happened to a person. And guess what that person has? They were born somewhere, they live somewhere, they went to school somewhere. So why am I not connecting people to the case based on the connections of the case, as opposed to some random person scrolling through 16,000 Facebook pages throughout the United States, hoping that they find the one case that they might actually have a connection with? And this spawned out of work I did actually with America's Most Wanted for a little over a year. I was their technical advisor, and I helped them build a solution that we actually rolled out for the 1000th episode. And I was so frustrated because people were just doing it wrong. I mean, and so we built the first one on Facebook. The problem with building it on Facebook or any platform like that is they tend to own the data. And if they change the algorithm, it breaks everything. But our first success was a fugitive that the sheriff's office was looking for. They'd been looking for this guy for 6 months. I said, just give me his name. That's all I need. I need his name. You know, just whatever you put out on a flyer, whatever you would give the public. Did some open source research, put him into the system. We found the guy in 36 hours in Philadelphia. Why? Because a lady in Philadelphia was living in the same area that this guy was. What did they have in connection? Demographics and relation. They were living in the same place at the same time. She got an indication that says, hey, you may be connected to this case because you and the suspect both live in the same area or one of the areas. She pulled up his picture, said, that's not the name he's using. This is the name he's using. And that's how we found the guy. So that was the first use of it. Couldn't figure out how to make money doing it, you know? So it was like, God, this sucks. So, but I'll tell you what really revamped this. I got to thinking about it. I said, it should only be based on publicly available information. In other words, what's your zip code? What's your, where did you go to school at? None of those things tend to identify you, Howard, or tend to identify you, Sean. If I just said, what zip code do you live in? Okay. And where did you go to school? Okay. And what zip code did you grow up in? Okay. But guess what? You have a homicide. Guess what I'm looking for? Or a missing person or sex trafficking. What's the zip code where this is happening? What's the zip code where the victim came from? Now I'm connecting people based on things that they have in common, as opposed to having somebody scour the internet looking for, the one case. So that's where the social DNA comes from. And that's what we're actually working on right now with Amazon and the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police is actually building this capability. It'll be just like Instagram for crime. It'll be an app. It's only an app, not a web page. It's an app for the public, I should say. And you just put in your basic information. There's not even an email address is needed. Why? Because you get a unique user ID. It's only push notifications. If there's nothing in common, you don't get a notification, but you do get a notification where it says, hey, Sean, you might be connected to this case. Why? Because this person was a stripper in Salt Lake and you happen to be at that club, 5 years ago. But the thing is, right? Would you have ever heard of this case otherwise? No. But now that's how we're connecting people. And actually was supposed to be on the second episode when they revamped America's Most Wanted. We're supposed to be talking about some Ukrainians and stuff. And I actually floated this idea with them. But even television is still focused on, well, we're going to use social media. No, you're not. Anyway, so I blabbed on long enough, but that's the idea. That was the patent. It's how to use publicly available information to connect people to cases.
Well, okay. So I love that idea. I love the macro instead of the micro. I love the fact that you're going to use it for good. But as with all this information that's available, people are using it for bad too. How are you going to kind of try to protect some of this information so innocent people aren't getting affected by it? And when I say that, like if you can plug in something to find a criminal can plug the same information in to find a mark, correct?
No, they can't. See, no. See, look,
okay,
so
cool.
I've been down this road before. Have actually worked on very classified, very sensitive systems. And I've seen, what they've done. But the thing about this is, the only people who can enter cases are the law enforcement agencies themselves, which means they already have a case number. They're already looking for somebody. Gotcha. Or, me as the organization for VACP, we could actually go in and enter the FBI top 10 or the U.S. Marshals top 15. that's all publicly available information. So it is not a search mechanism to say, I want to search for hey, I want to find out who Howard Doss's latest squeeze is. There's no way to do that, because if there's not a case in the system, there's nothing for you to connect to. I see you. Look, not that there's anything wrong with that, Howard. But he's a friend. But what I'm saying is, so the system is engineered. Number one, it's completely about privacy. In fact, one of the companies I'm working with, they sell the same capability into the intelligence community so that they get information at the very edge of this, and they protect privacy all the way through. So that's why I said there's no personally identifiable information. There's no sensitive criminal justice information. None of that is being collected. The only thing that's being collected is nothing more than what is available through a public statement that a law enforcement agency would make to say, we're looking for these people, or we're looking for this case, or we need information on this unsolved homicide.
Gotcha. So they can't reverse use it like a police scanner, like a criminal gets.
No, because there's no way to do it, because the only thing that's in the system are cases, not people.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, but now the person is attached to the case, right? So, but this person lived in this zip code. But if you're searching for that, the only thing you're going to come up with is somebody who is already known to the public that they are either a victim of a crime, or they're a fugitive we're looking for, or a missing or endangered person. Information that's already available. There's no way for you to go search for an innocent person, because that innocent person's information is not in the system whatsoever.
Right. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And, and that's kind of what we alluded to earlier. And, he spoke about it, talking about NIBIN and all this type of stuff. People, I think, would be very surprised to know that law enforcement, specifically most of your police departments, not your federal agencies, we're very limited on resources or, things that you can do exactly like that. Interact with other agencies, whether it be a shooting case, a serial killer, anything like that, a rapist or something that's hit multiple jurisdictions. You just don't put these things together. But, from us on our investigative type of stuff, we use a lot of civilian-based technology, search engine, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there. I don't want to, say all of it, because they are investigative tools, but they're things the public can use as well. And they are a tremendous help for those of us in law enforcement. Now, NIBIN, honestly, I think that's amazing that you were part of that process getting started. My last couple of years on the police department, I was with our unit called the Crime Gun Unit, which is all we did was investigate shootings. And NIBIN was something we were using. We're very fortunate. We had one NIBIN machine for our own police department here. We got a grant and was able to get a second one. If I remember correctly, they were like $500,000, several $100,000. I do know that.
Too damn expensive.
They're outrageous. Yeah. But, the first several years I was in the gang unit, we're recovering literally hundreds of guns a year just in our gang unit alone. And we never one time, not once, had a single gun that we recovered connected to a shooting, because NIBIN for the state was so backlogged to get done. Once we got our own NIBIN machines here in Tulsa, all of a sudden we started having continual, we were literally having what we call 10-piece NIBIN hits. You'd have 10 separate incidents. The same gun was used in all of these over 4 months. Or finally, somebody would recover a gun. A patrol officer might recover a gun on a car stop. And then within 48 hours, we're getting it back sent to our unit. Hey, this gun this patrol officer recovered is connected to 4 different shootings you guys are working. But literally just as, I'm talking 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't able to do that.
Huh. Well, see, technology in medicine, we've got EMRs right now, which are electronic medical records. Yep. It goes with the patient. The patient has all that in there. You would think in law enforcement they'd have something like a CMR, like a criminal or a ECR, electronic criminal record.
Actually, they do.
Yeah, I was
they do
thing with your NCIC stuff or your criminal history, your triple
at a high level.
Yeah, it's called a triple I or whatever. Now that it's usually at it's your high level, your felony type of stuff. If you're arrested in Montgomery, Alabama or Tacoma, Washington, and we stop you here in Tulsa, we can run a criminal history or triple I on you, and we can see all that felony history on there. But as far as like who this guy's been stopped with in Tacoma, Washington on what we call a field interview report, who his homeboys are there, who his girlfriend is, we don't have any access to that stuff at all unless hey, I'm going to contact Tacoma.
And the only way you'd be able to find it I was going to say the only way you'd be able to find it is if you had something that says, "Hey, I'm from the Tacoma, Washington area," and then you teletype Tacoma, Washington. You say, "You got anything on this guy?" So there's so many steps that have to make happen, as opposed to. So Sean, you'd appreciate this. The one thing I asked them to build, and they could have done it for $5 million, and I was told by somebody at the FBI, "Well, we got other things we want to build." I said, "What's more important than solving crime?" I thought this is what you guys did. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
They don't.
But imagine getting an NCIC return back that says, "Hey, the record's clear, but here's the last 10 inquiries on this plate, and here's the agency who made them, and here's the date and time that they made them," right? Or this person. Or the other thing I said, poor man's link analysis. Run a transaction code so that when your dispatcher runs the vehicle and the people with the vehicle, it all ties them together by a unique transaction code. That way, if that person's ever stopped in another car, you can link transaction codes together and find out, hey, this guy is in this car, but this guy was in this car with this same person. I mean, such a wealth of information, and all they had to do is spend about $5 million. But no, I was told somebody's pet project needed that $5 million.
Man, hell, Instagram does that better than the FBI, I guess, huh?
I moderated a panel for MIT one time, and I actually had a lawyer there from the NSA and stuff, and people from industry. I said, "Let me ask you something. Who do you fear more, the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI, or Google, Facebook, and Amazon?" And it's Google, Facebook, and Amazon. They have so much more data on you than anybody else. They are the envy of every intelligence agency throughout the world, both, friendly and hostile. The information they collect and they know, that's where you get into things called psychographics. That's where I can start predicting. Why do you think Amazon serves you up an ad that says, "Hey, you might also be interested in this"? Do you think it's by accident? No, it's based upon collecting data across thousands of platforms to say, and I'll tell you how good Target was at this. Target was so good at this. They used to be able to send out flyers to people, and they would know you're pregnant or you're buying a gift for somebody who's pregnant. And a father got one of those, and he said, "My daughter's not pregnant because she's 16 years old. She was pregnant."
Oh, shit.
And this is a whole huge, yep. They know more about you than you know about yourself.
Well, this has been fascinating, gone quick. We've got about 5 minutes left, man. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us some more stuff.
Sure. Well, my partner Murph, he couldn't be on because he's moving to Florida right now. They're having to clean up the house. It was a shit show. So Murph is my partner on the podcast Game of Crimes. And we started this back on June 28th was our first episode. And so Murph, for you guys who don't know, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena were the two DEA agents that brought down Pablo that the Narcos Netflix series was made about. So Steve and I we do what we call long form interviews. Some of our interviews most of them are all two-parters. They're usually about 3.5 hours each. I mean, we do a lot of research. We go really deep. So we've had George Young, Pablo's business partner, Dave Reichert, the lead investigator for the Green River Killers, Dominic Polifrone, the ATF agent who brought down the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski. We've had bad people on there too, a money launderer. We've had, like I said, George Young, and we've got a guy coming up, Luis Navia, that was popped coming out of Venezuela with 9,000 kilos of coke. He was one of the largest narco traffickers in the world. And I've actually got his book back here right now. It's called Pure Narco. It's going to be released in November. It is 600 pages. This guy came out of Cuba, but ended up working with all of the different cartels. And so, yeah, Murph and I, what we do is we really do a lot of research. We go long form. And so Game of Crimes is what I'm working on right now. I'm doing some other stuff, in industry and the news and stuff. But you know what I'd really rather do? I'd rather do this podcast. And I want to get this out built because you know what I really believe? I really believe that if you can give people the opportunity to say, "Hey, I want to get involved without being involved," but if I can just add my social DNA, not a social profile, but just social DNA, what's the zip code I lived in? What's the school I went to? What's an employer I worked for, like Walmart? What's a vacation I went to? Let me take all of that stuff. And it's like DNA, right? How does DNA work? DNA works by taking it and putting it into a system called CODIS, Combined DNA Information System. So when you get an unknown sample, you put it in the system to say, is there a match there? On the other hand, you have all of these known cases. You get an unknown offender and you put it in there and you go, "Hey, does this unknown offender now, I just arrested Sean. I take his DNA and I put it in the system. And just like a gun, I get 4 hits to say Sean's DNA now has been found on these 4 crime scenes." That's what social DNA does. And the best thing about this too, for me, gets past all of this argument about the Gabby Petito case where they called it white woman syndrome. Yet she's the only one getting the oxygen. This system compares everything. It's ones and zeros. It's totally blind. Every case has an equal chance of being solved, and it doesn't care what your social status is. It doesn't care what your gender, your preference. It's irrelevant. All it looks for is, do you have a connection between you and this case? And if so, we push a notification to you. And then just like Crime Stoppers, you go, hey, do I want to help solve this case or not? And then you make a call or you don't. But, you know, at the end of the day, we believe we can expose more people to connections to cases. And the other thing, too, is the internet has no concept of distance. We're recording this on a Sunday. 12 hours from now, I'm actually, maybe about 18 hours from now, I'm actually on a phone call with people in the UK and the London Met and the UK police to talk to them about building an international version of this, bringing in the London Met. So that's the next step. That's what I'm working on. If I could do nothing, I would do podcasts, because you can see I like to talk. There's a shock. I used to do a lot of interview and interrogation.
Love it.
So anyway, that's what I'm working on right now.
So the app, is it out yet? And if so, what's the name? If not, do you have a name of what it will be and when you anticipate it being out?
It's going to be called Holmes, after Sherlock Holmes. Why? Because he was the world's first private detective. So that's what we want to be. And it's really based on the Sir Robert Peel community policing principles. The police are the public, and the public are the police. So a lot of that depends too. Right now, it's pretty much, the design is all done. Now, guess what it is? It's just an issue of funding. So we actually have a couple funding sources lined up between the Commonwealth and industry. But we think if it goes right, we could have this thing, a prototype built within 90 days and have it fully operational within 6 months from now.
Outstanding.
This is fascinating shit.
Nope, it's good.
This is, I mean, this can really make society a better place if you're able just to link up the information in one central repository.
Well, and before we get out of here, I mean, you hit it right on the head, even talking about Gabby Petito and all of these home sleuths, whether they're, housewives at home or, guys, whatever it is, everybody, it's a big thing now. People get online, the talk groups or chat rooms or whatever it is, everybody's doing their own little thing, trying to investigate these type of cases out. Yep. Everybody wants to be a part of it. They want to help. And it sounds like that app of yours is just another step towards more and more people being involved, trying to solve some crimes.
Imagine getting teams of people together to say, we're going to create a group of us to come together and get people to put their social DNA in there. And we're going to see if Team DOS or Team Larkin can solve more cases than the other teams can, and not by going out and being vigilantes, because you can't do it by saying, running down. It's all about getting people to put their information into. Cops have one system, right? Yep. Where is the one system for the public to go to find information about missing kids, unsolved homicides, sexual predators, human sex trafficking, missing and endangered? Where's the one place that the public goes? And there is none.
Nope.
Morgan, you got to come back on. This went way too fast.
Anytime, bro.
Scratch the surface. I mean, what you're talking about right now kind of reminds me of that that Netflix special they said. What was it? Don't fuck with cats.
I did not watch that. I heard it was fucking.
Yeah, the internet will win. I mean,
that was
a prime example of what you're talking about. A group of like-minded people went out and found somebody who was doing some horrible stuff. Ended up being a murderer.
Yep.
So, but yes, it was a pleasure having you, and thank goodness you didn't drink Apple Crown. We really like the Belgian beer. That works well for us. We definitely want to have you back on after the first of the year.
I'll tell you what, we do this, and I will send you. Here's what we will do. There's a beer called West Vleteren. It is rated the world's best beer. What do you think one bottle, 11.2 ounces, how much do you think one bottle of West Vleteren 12 goes for?
Is it 12 years? What's the 12 stand for?
No, it's 12 is just it's a special designation. So
I'm going to go 180.
I was going to say like $55.
No, not that much. I mean, but it's about $28 a bottle for West Vleteren. But the monks, it is a Trappist monastery, and the monks make it. So we do this again. I will send you. We will all have the same beer. I guarantee you, once you have this beer, it's like beer porn. You will never look at beer the same way again.
Done.
Ever.
Big Herc on again.
Done. Yep.
All right. Sounds great, Morgan. It's great to talk to you. Thank you.
Have a good one, buddy. Thank you.